Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where you'll find information on what's going on the North Fork of Long Island. We'll be focusing on issues and opportunities going on in the community, as well as people and stories from the present and the past. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 12, we have Melissa Azofeifa. She is a staff reporter for the Suffolk Times, and we talked to her about her time growing up on Long Island and how she got interested in journalism and broadcasting, and her time in college, and eventually making her way out to the North Fork working at the Suffolk Times, and how that experience has been for her, and what she enjoys about her job. So I hope you enjoy episode 12 with Melissa Azofeifa. Thank you for coming in today to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored.
So, as with most of the episodes I've been doing, I like to just start off with the person giving a little introduction, just where they were born and raised.
Yeah. So, I was born in Costa Rica. I lived there until I was a little over 5 years old, and then my family, we all decided to come to the United States. There were better opportunities for my family, and I arrived here December of 96, and have lived in Hampton Bays, actually, on the South Fork ever since.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been great. I love being on Long Island, and I very easily, since I came so young, I very easily adapted to the lifestyle and everything. Yeah, It's been wonderful.
Did your parents say why they picked Hampton Bays?
So that's a good question. I know my dad had a brother that had been here before he came over, and I think my dad came to see first and check, what opportunities there were in terms of work and things like that, and see if the move was feasible. And I think it was mainly that we had some family here on the island that kind of drew them here.
And so you were born in Costa Rica, but how much schooling did you have?
None. No. I started kindergarten here. I think we lived in East Quogue for a little bit, and for like a month or two, and then so I went to started kindergarten there, and then we moved to Hampton Bays, and I went through that district K through 12. Yeah, nice. It was interesting. It's nice. Me and I have two brothers, and the three of us went through the entire. We've had teachers, as it is here in towns. Siblings and entire families go through the same school district and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, going back a little bit for your ancestry, does it all go back to Costa Rica? If you went back to your grandparents and
most of them, I know I have heritage from Spain on both sides, both my parents and both my mom and my dad. I know that I have a great grandfather, I think, on my dad's side, who he actually was a Sephardi Jew who had to flee Spain. And the only reason I know about this is because my cousin brought it up to me at one point a few years back. And Spain, as part of reparations for everything that they did towards that community, or for all that stuff that happened there, they had a list of last names of people that would automatically, if you had that last name, like, you were granted citizenship. And my last name was on that list. And we didn't find out until much later, but I thought that was a cool tidbit, a cool way to find out a little bit about my heritage. But that's the earliest I know, actually. I don't know exactly how long ago that must have been, but it was a while back.
A while back. And that was on your dad's side?
On my dad's side, yeah.
And your mom's side, you're not sure how far?
I'm not sure how far back, but I know that they also have connections to Spain. I know my cousin on her side is also doing like a family tree kind of thing, but I don't think he's done with it. I'm not exactly sure how far back he's gotten.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you know what your parents did in Costa Rica for a living?
Yeah, so my mom worked for, my dad did a little bit of everything. He told me at one point he was a bartender and all that, but he wound up being an accountant for a car company, I believe, down in Costa Rica. Before when he had me, I'm the oldest of my three siblings, and my mother, she worked as a secretary. She worked for the Costa Rican government at one point, and then she also wound up working privately for like a pharmaceutical company down there as a secretary. But once she had us, she kind of retired from that and dedicated herself to us.
And like you said before, they just in terms of economic stability, they've decided to move.
Yeah, it was I guess my uncle had moved here first, and he was telling my dad about the great opportunities and that he found here. And my dad came here, worked with my uncle for a little bit, and it got to the age where my mom was noticing. She was like, my dad came here 9 months actually before we did. And I was getting to the age where I needed to start school. So my mom was like, do I enroll her here? What are we doing? And my dad sent her over the money and told her to start getting work on the paperwork that it would take to get us over here and all that. But yeah, it was mainly kind of, to have a better financial circumstances as a family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you say what your dad ended up doing here?
So here, he worked, I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but here he wound up working in, he does some light construction, but mainly painting. He's painted a lot of different houses, some luxury, some your regular home. And my mother, she's house kept as well. She's goes and helps maintain people's houses and clean. She's got certain clients that she tends to.
And so now you were settled in Hampton Bays, and you said you went to school there all the way through high school.
Yeah.
But how was the environment going to school there?
That's a great question. The environment was interesting because when we first arrived, there weren't very many Latino heritage people when I first arrived. And as time started passing and I started going through school, I noticed that population grew. And it was nice. I was able to, make friends and be cohesive with everyone. Since I came here so little, it was very easy to adapt because it's all I knew. But going to school there in terms of academics was also pretty great. The teachers were fantastic. I do remember particularly struggling with like math and science, and the teachers were always available to help. There are two teachers that were dedicated to, particularly one of them I remember, that were dedicated to like special education and other students that I I felt I formed a close relationship with and were very helpful at that time. But yeah, it was a great experience overall. I mean, high school is a hard era for many people.
Yes.
So, but I can't complain. It was definitely a good experience.
And outside of school, did you have any activities that you did for fun, or just in terms of what you did on the weekend or as a kid?
Yeah. So, I would hang out with friends that I would have from school. I would participate in gymnastics. I did cheerleading. I also participated a bit in the theater group at the school. And aside from any school connections, I grew very close to a youth group that was founded at that time, and I almost dedicated fully to that around age 15, and started helping there at my local church, and became very heavily involved, and it was a great few years. Once I started to get into college and stuff, I had to pull back because I had to, college takes a lot out of you, and you need to dedicate all the resources that you can to kind of get through it. So I kind of had to step back a little bit from my involvement in there, but it was a great couple of years volunteering and trying to make a difference in the community through that youth group.
And through the time in high school, did you get to travel back to Costa Rica?
No, I didn't get to travel to Costa Rica. I didn't get to travel to Costa Rica a lot. I wish I could have, but there were other circumstances that didn't allow me to go back. And it makes me very sad because, like I said, I love being from here and growing up here, but it's a part of me that, when I do get the chance to go back, it'll be interesting. I'll be like a complete tourist because I will know nothing, in terms of the sights and things to see and things to do, and but yeah,
it could be kind of special going back just because that's where your parents and family were from, but it's always interesting how people who live there now might be like, oh well, you grew up in the U.S., but you still have heritage that goes back there. So
yeah, it's interesting because as you said, it almost feels like you're neither here nor there.
Yeah, do you fit here? Or do you fit there?
Exactly. It's a little difficult, and I try and keep in touch with a lot of my cousins and family members through social media. Has helped a lot with that, and keeping up to date and making those connections. We've had so much family come over here to visit as well, so that's a way I kind of keep in touch with them and make sure that I keep in touch with that part and keep that part of me very alive and well, because that has been very important to my parents and to myself as well.
And going back to school, towards the end of high school, did you know what you wanted to do coming out of high school or while you were in high school?
Kind of. I feel like I was unsure. I was trying to think practically. I knew I wanted to do something with writing. I also, like I said, I wanted to think practically in case I wanted to go back to Costa Rica, and have something that I could use there too. When I first enrolled, as I graduated high school, I enrolled to go to Suffolk County Community College, and I took their liberal arts course there, and I initially thought I was going to be an English teacher. And then as I got through the process, thankfully, I had a great experience at Suffolk County Community College as well. I had a lot of friends that were also there at the time, which also made it really fun. But it also helped me explore. It gave me the opportunity to explore and kind of see what I wanted to do, going further to a 4-year university. And that's kind of where I found a little bit my interest in journalism.
And also, did you feel that you wanted to, because you mentioned thinking about Costa Rica, but did you feel like you wanted to leave Long Island at some point?
I felt like, yeah, kind of. I mean, that thing that you get when you're that age that you want to like explore and see the world, and as I said, that's a huge part of me that's been kept alive, and I was always very curious, and that was definitely a conversation that was being had with my family, but years later, I'm still here, so can't take Long Island out of the girl either.
Yes. And so you picked, after finishing Suffolk Community College, you decided you wanted to go into journalism at Stony Brook.
Yeah. And it wasn't so much because of the courses I was taking there, but it was more kind of my own interests. I noticed myself keeping in tabs with things that were going on around the world, and I noticed that becoming a wider interest in me, and I thought also it was a great way to satiate the creative aspect of the creative desires that anyone can have, particularly me, and also satiate kind of my desire to write, and I've always been very curious, so I thought it would be a great career because you're constantly learning. So I love that about journalism, and that's kind of what drew me to it.
And then, were there any specific events that kind of like, oh, I want to kind of dive more into this, or any role models from journalism that you're like, oh, this is interesting how this person's doing?
That's a great question. I can't remember anything from that era, actually, from that time, that drew me to that. I just remember constantly looking at the New York Times and going back to that and thinking that that's, the standard of journalism. And I remember reading a bunch of articles from them that I was very interested in, even as I got older, because I was particularly like, looking back, I was in 5th grade when 9/11 happened, and it was, old enough to understand, but at the same time, not really. So I remember particularly once I looked back at the New York Times 9/11 coverage and other news media outlets 9/11 coverage, and I was just curious at how you would cover such a devastating event and how to properly document the devastation that caused. And
yes.
So I think that would be the one topic that kind of drew me.
And then overall at Stony Brook, how was that experience?
That was amazing. It actually was a really great experience. I loved it, since it's still a fairly young program. It's just I think it's just over a decade. But well, no, not at this point. Anyways, it was such a great experience. I've made friends who are also in the field that I hope will remain lifelong friends. And it was such as I said, it's a fairly new program, so it was small and intimate, and I thought having that intimate connection with the professors was particularly helpful, and it made the experience all the more enjoyable. And yeah, no, I have no complaints from my time at Stony Brook. It was spectacular. I was able to get involved with student media. I was able to have, like I said, make friends and have a life, kind of experience have the college experience without leaving too far away, which was also a perk because I was trying to save up.
Yes.
But it was, it was wonderful. I will always look back on those years at Stony Brook with such catharsis and such joy.
And as you were kind of finishing up your major in journalism, did you have any specific track that you could go on, or was it kind of a general?
Yeah, so when you started, you kind of, because they had the curriculum based on whether you wanted to do broadcast or print, and I chose print. I chose broadcast. I chose broadcast when I started, and I had a great time with the cameras and learning how to do the equipment and learning how to produce news packages that you would see on TV. I chose broadcast because it's also where the industry is kind of leading us towards, at least from what I learned at the time. And I was very curious about what it was like to be in a new studio, and I got that experience as well. I chose the broadcast to answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. So now finishing up, were you looking to work in a broadcast environment?
Yeah, as I was applying to jobs, I was looking to work in broadcast, become a multimedia journalist with, our cameras and our microphones, and I'm a small girl and carrying that equipment is hard, but it was a lot of fun doing that at school. So I thought it would be great to do that. I applied a couple places, but none of them really worked out. And yeah, that's kind of how I wound up in print at the Suffolk Times, because the opportunities that came up in broadcast were far away and were not very well paying. They weren't paying well enough to make it worth my while to move so far away, if that makes sense. The salary made it very hard for me to see myself be able to sustain living far away from here. So
is there more of that in closer as you get to New York City? Or were you applying even to places?
Yeah, I was applying to places out further as well. I was applying to anywhere that needed an MMJ. Just because at the same time, I thought you got to look for the opportunities where they're available. So that's why I wasn't really scared of looking, but I'm very happy I wound up staying here. Yeah.
And before you had accepted the job at the Suffolk Times, had you ever visited the North Fork before that?
Yeah. We would come to Greenport. I would come to the Maritime Festival. And we would come to Greenport and drive through Southold and see all the nature that was here. But I definitely got to know it in a much deeper way through my job. I knew it very, very, incredibly surface level back then before I actually was hired here. I just knew it was the other fork, or Twin Fork. And we would drive and again get to know Greenport and other areas here, but there's no way I could have known it the way I know the area now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so how was it getting started there? Was it kind of nervous in the beginning, just kind of, because you were planning on doing more of the broadcasting, but now you switched to being more print and that was kind of a change for you. But
Yeah.
how was it do you have the first project you worked on that you can remember?
Yeah. I remember my second day on the job, actually. My editor, he told me that Mila Kunis was filming a movie out in Shelter Island.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me to get on the ferry. Was it Shelter Island or the other island that's
Not Shelter Island. What is it?
Yeah, on Shelter Island, actually.
Oh, Shelter Island.
Sorry. Yeah, on Shelter Island, and he told me to get to Greenport and take the ferry over there because for that movie, they had turned it had been turned into Nantucket. So I spent my second day kind of chasing her around and trying to like sneak my way onto the set,
Yes.
which thankfully I managed to. But yeah, that was a really cool introduction to the area, and that was always also an interest of mine. I've also been very much into pop culture, so I thought it was really cool to have that as my assignment for the second day. But yeah, I was very nervous in terms of that shift because I was managing editor at my university newspaper, The Statesman, and I wrote weekly articles for that, but not it was professional, but I feel like the volume and the experience that you needed, I definitely gained that working at the Times. But yeah.
And how long have you been at the Suffolk Times?
So I was hired August of 2021. So I've been there just a bit over 2 years and a half.
And what would you say through that time was your favorite article you've written?
That's a very hard question to answer. I can think of a few, like 2 or 3 right off the bat. Particularly, I remember, and this article kind of fell in my lap, to say, for lack of a better term, but I had written about the Kalmar nickel coming to Greenport, and the Kalmar nickel is a replica. I think it would have been the second time it had come. I think the first time it had come was in 2015 to the village, and I got an email from someone at Peconic Landing letting me know that one of their residents actually had heritage that came over on the original Kalmar nickel. And I thought that was such a cool story. Her name was Doris Sherman, and I wound up writing that article August of 2022. That was such a cool experience to see her kind of learn a little more about her heritage and just see how happy she was. She went with her son on a Sunday. They took her on a boat ride on the replica, and I just thought that was so wonderful. I love stories about the people that live in the community. Very, very drawn to human interest stories. I also remember the story about these siblings in Wading River, Ruby and Everett Cotter. They both wound up being diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy, and they both wound up needing heart transplants to continue living. I started covering this as Everett, the second sibling, wound up needing his transplant, and I started getting to know a little bit about their story through covering that the summer of 2022. But I also thought that was one of my favorite stories, simply because it was so heartwarming to see how the family, how the community wrapped around that family and helps them through, the unimaginable. I can imagine it was difficult for them to go through that when their eldest daughter Ruby got sick, but to go through it a second time with their youngest, like I couldn't imagine how difficult that was, and it was just so, it showed the best of what of our potential, seeing how people wrapped around this family and cradled them. So that definitely was one of my favorite stories as well. So it's very hard to choose.
How many stories or articles have you written in total that you can?
It's definitely over 200. I would
over
say.
200.
Yeah, because I've been
And you would do one once a week.
So we we would do between 3 to 5. I personally would do around 3 to 5 a week, I feel like. And that's kind of where I am at now. If I can do more, I try and squeeze that in. But we would do around 3 to 5. As every day goes on, as you come in every morning to come to work, you're balancing a couple of different stories. You're reaching out to people for a couple of different stories. You're juggling a couple of balls in the air.
And I guess kind of getting into what you're saying now, what do you think is the most challenging thing about your job?
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel like I'm growing in terms of that, but it's definitely time management. And with guidance from your editors, I think it also helps that to know what they think you should prioritize. But it definitely, the time management aspect when you're juggling so much and when you're trying to get everything in on a deadline and be accurate and be good and be have everything in quickly as well. It can be difficult.
And I guess what would be the thing you enjoy most about your job?
The thing I enjoy the most about my job is definitely getting to know the community, getting to know the people in the community. I love talking to people and hearing their stories and being able to share it. Particularly, like I said, human interest stories are a huge, huge draw of mine. This story comes to mind that I wrote about this couple. This man who was otherwise healthy one day got very sick, and his wife and his family, they were a young couple. They were just starting out, and they started a GoFundMe, and the community wrapped around them as well and helped them. And I hope he's doing well. I actually haven't followed up, but he wound up having melanoma, and it was a very difficult moment for that family. But I love seeing how the community can wrap around and help each other and lift each other up. And stories like that are definitely the thing that I enjoy the most about my job, because it does give you, like I said, it shows you the potential of the best that we can be.
And I had another question. With just the news today and a lot of misinformation with stuff online and people saying, well, this is more biased towards that, or it's more one's more on the right side, one's on the left side. How do you kind of balance kind of trying to be neutral in the middle with a lot of information that's being thrown out to people in society where they're getting their news from one certain area? But as a journalist, you kind of, I don't know, is it kind of you want to be kind of just provide the news or provide information in ways that people can absorb, but still, I guess, not be biased in one way or another?
Yeah. I think I remember my first semester at Stony Brook University. I took a course in media literacy, and I think that's something that should be taught in like middle school to everyone, because it definitely is so important for us to know how to consume the news and how it kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
So as a human being, it's very difficult. You're always going to have a bias, always. And I think as a journalist, as you mentioned, our job is to kind of give you the facts and let you make up your mind about what's going on. It's not to talk down to you and tell you this is what you should do, this is what you should follow or believe. And I personally, I don't know if that's why I gravitate more towards the human interest stories, because I feel like when it comes into politics and government stories and stories that are more political, and it's very difficult to show, to keep your bias out of that. I covered the battery energy storage facility
Yes.
that was being proposed on Oregon Road in Cutchogue, and what I did there, and with any story when it comes to politics, I try to reflect the voice of the community and what people are saying, and try to kind of keep whatever I feel about the topic completely, because it's irrelevant. Like, you're reporting on what's going on and what the community feels and what they're saying to their elected government officials. But yeah, I think it is important to check on yourself and make sure that, read your writing, make sure that there aren't any inflammatory words, or make sure that there isn't a specific tone whenever you're addressing a particular subject. Yeah.
And then you said you tend to gravitate more towards human interest instead of the politics. And then are you kind of left free to decide what you would really want to go into, or are they kind of the people in charge saying you should be focusing on this, or you should be getting stories like this, where someone else, another reporter, might focus more on certain topics?
Yeah, so I think for the most part we're kind of free to report on what's interesting to us. I mean, if something happens at town hall and the person who usually covers it isn't able to go, or something, some huge political government meeting happens and we all have to cover it, or elections, it's like our Super Bowl, so it's all hands on deck. So yeah, but for the most part we're able to kind of pitch the stories that we that we want to cover, and do that.
And you haven't had any scenarios where you've had overlap, where someone was like, well, I was actually going to do that story.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, someone got to it first, or
all the time.
That happens.
All the time. But I think I personally have such a good relationship with all my colleagues that thankfully it's not a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. We're able to talk it through.
Yes. And so now that you've been working here, what do you like about the North Fork and working out here?
One, the people. The people everyone is so kind, and really everyone I've interviewed has been such a pleasure to work with, and are so open to speaking to us and sharing their stories, and they know how important it is to kind of keep the charm of the area. And I think that's something that I've definitely realized as I've covered the area, how important that is to everyone out here. And the views, it's such a beautiful place. Getting to see Orient Beach State Park, that's a little bit down from here, getting to see South Hometown Beach, or even, all of these areas that are so picturesque and beautiful no matter what time. So those are my two favorite things about working here, and the fact that it allows me to stay close to those that I care about too, because my family is still here, and to stay here and save up and live a good life not too far away from home.
Mm-hmm.
So those, I would say, are the things that I like about the North Fork and working out here.
And as you've probably seen working here, since you've been working here, it's changed, and you probably noticed change within Hampton Bays too, because it's kind of like the Hamptons from the east has been kind of encroaching over to Hampton Bays, and things probably have changed. Have you noticed change even with where you grew up?
Oh yeah.
Even from when you were a child?
Even from when I was a child, because I've been here just over 26 years at this point. But yeah, the Hampton Bays has changed so much, and I feel like there's change to come, because of the fact that it's changing so much, and the demographic also has changed. I feel like in the time that I've been here, so it's had to naturally change with that. But yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of change, and even the couple of years that I've been covering, this area, 2.5 years is really not much, but I've seen a few changes happen nearby, like particularly like with us moving and Endless Round Golf moving into, which is awesome, moving into our old office building, or different businesses opening up where something else was, and certain other businesses closing down. Like it's change. I've definitely noticed change.
And just a last question.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now in your career?
That is also a very hard question. I have big ambitions. If I'm able to dream a little bit, I would love to eventually wind up at the New York Times covering various different topics. In my time here, I've covered education, I've covered, like I said, human interest stories, I've covered some politics, I've also covered very tragic events, and I feel like that's given me a pretty good skill set. But like I said, that would be a dream. I would also love to at one point work at Newsday. And if I wanted to go towards my guilty pleasures and kind of lean into that a little bit, I love keeping up with popular culture and keeping up with artists and what their latest work is and people that I admire. So I would love to eventually work at either Hollywood Reporter, Rolling Stone, or Magazine or Variety. So that's where I would hope to end up eventually in 10 years from now.
Wonderful. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come in today, and thank you for working on the North Fork and bringing stories to the public's eye.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor. I was so happy to see that this podcast was started, and when I was invited, it was an honor. So and it's an honor to continue covering this area that people love so much, and sharing these stories that are so close to the community's heart. So it's an honor and a pleasure, and I hope to continue to do that to people's enjoyment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 12 with Melissa Azofeifa. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you soon.